Ever imagined living a life of unimaginable luxury?
But you can't buy the one thing you truly desire.
Yeah, that's the story of Soraya Esfandiari Bakhtiari.
The Empress of Iran.
Buckle up.
Because her life was anything but a fairy tale.
So today we're diving into this captivating yet heartbreaking story.
And what makes this deep dive even more fascinating
Right?
is that we're experiencing Soraya's story through her own words.
Oh, yeah, interesting.
Our source is an episode of the Noble Blood podcast,
Okay.
which draws from her two autobiographies.
Wow.
It's a unique perspective,
Yeah.
allowing us to glimpse behind the curtain of royalty,
I like that.
but also a reminder to consider her personal lens on events.
Okay, so we're talking about a woman
Right.
who went from being a German-Iranian girl with dreams of becoming an actress to suddenly finding herself at the center of global attention
Yes.
as the Empress of Iran.
It's quite a story.
It was almost like something out of a movie.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that clash of cultures in her early life, her German mother. Right.
Iranian father,
Mm.
childhood spent between Isfahan and Europe.
Yeah.
It's almost as if it was foreshadowing the complexities she'd later face as Empress,
Wow.
navigating between tradition and modernity,
Yeah.
East and West.
It's like her upbringing was preparing her for that delicate balancing act.
Yeah, you could say that.
An actress turned empress.
Right.
That's not exactly the typical path to royalty.
Not at all. And it seems her parents weren't thrilled about her acting aspirations either.
Oh, really?
They sent her to London to live with relatives
Wow.
and polish her English,
Interesting.
hoping to steer her towards a more suitable path.
Hmm.
Little did they know,
Yeah.
fate had other plans.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because the story of how Soraya caught the Shah's eye
Uh-huh.
sounds almost too perfect to be true.
It does, doesn't it?
Like something out of a Hollywood script.
It starts with photographs.
Okay.
Soraya's cousin, a photography enthusiast,
Yeah.
took countless pictures of her.
Seemingly innocent. Right.
You're saying there was more to it?
Much more. Those photos were specifically intended for the Shah's mother, who was on the lookout for a bride for her son.
I see.
And who better to present these photos than the Shah's sister,
Oh, wow.
Princess Shams?
Oh,
She happened to meet Soraya at a dinner party,
okay.
instantly charmed by her,
Uh-huh.
and, well, you can guess the rest.
So it was a setup.
It seems so.
Soraya was completely unaware of this orchestrated matchmaking.
Apparently, so at least initially. But there were subtle hints dropped, whispers about sharing the Shah's life.
Yeah.
And soon enough, she found herself whisked away to Iran to meet the royal family.
Talk about a whirlwind romance.
I really was.
But was it genuine?
That's a good question.
Was there real affection between them, or was this purely a strategic union?
Soraya's autobiographies paint a picture of a genuine connection.
Okay.
She describes their courtship as a time filled with stolen moments at formal events.
Uh-huh.
Picnics, lavish gifts, all the trappings of a fairy tale romance.
It sounds very romantic.
And from her descriptions of the Shah, it seems she was genuinely smitten.
Imposing, magnificent, splendid,
Yeah.
handsome, and knew how to smile.
Yes.
Those are her exact words, right?
Yes, and the Shah seemed equally captivated.
Okay.
But this whirlwind romance unfolded against a backdrop of political turmoil in Iran,
Right.
something that would cast a long shadow over their relationship.
Right, because this was the time of the nationalization of Iranian oil.
Yes.
A very turbulent time.
A move that significantly weakened the Shah's power and plunged him into a period of paranoia and depression.
Exactly.
Not exactly the ideal setting for a blossoming romance.
It created an atmosphere of uncertainty and tension.
Yeah.
A far cry from the fairy tale they were living.
Okay.
But amidst all this, their grand wedding became a symbol of hope and stability for the nation.
Okay, let's talk about that wedding.
Okay.
The podcast described it as a spectacle of epic proportions.
It was an incredible event.
I mean, a dress weighing half her body weight. I know, it's hard to imagine.
A 10-foot train. It sounds absolutely breathtaking.
It really was.
Was she excited?
Oh, absolutely.
Nervous.
Her account suggests she was absolutely radiant, eager to say yes.
Wow.
But as you can imagine, the fairy tale atmosphere was short-lived.
Right.
The political turmoil didn't exactly take a break for the royal honeymoon.
So how did this political climate impact their relationship?
Oh.
How did Soraya handle the pressures of being the empress during such a tumultuous period?
Despite the challenges, she remained a steadfast pillar of support for the Shah.
Wow, that's incredible.
She viewed her role as being his anchor, his solace amidst the storm. It was a heavy burden to bear,
Right.
especially for someone so young.
And it couldn't have been easy to maintain a sense of normalcy with all that political upheaval swirling around them.
It wasn't.
Did they ever get a chance to just be a regular couple?
They did try.
Oh.
There were lavish trips to America and Europe, Hollywood parties, even dinner with Queen Elizabeth II.
Wow.
They tried to carve out moments of normalcy, but the weight of their roles
Right.
and the looming issue of an heir
Yeah.
always lingered.
Ah, yes, the heir.
Right.
The age-old pressure for a male heir to secure the dynasty.
It's a familiar story, isn't it?
Was there immediate pressure on Soraya to produce one?
Absolutely. And that pressure only intensified after the Shah's brother, the only other heir to the throne, tragically died.
Wow.
Suddenly, the future of the dynasty rested solely on Soraya's shoulders.
What an immense burden to carry.
It was.
Especially on top of everything else she was dealing with.
Right.
So was she able to fulfill this expectation?
Sadly, no.
Oh.
And that's where things take a truly heartbreaking turn.
Okay.
Despite numerous consultations with specialists and desperate attempts,
Wow.
it became clear that Soraya was unable to conceive.
Oh, wow.
It was a devastating blow for both of them.
You can only imagine the emotional toll that must have taken on her.
Yes, it's hard to imagine.
To be living this seemingly charmed life,
Right.
surrounded by opulence, yet struggling with such a personal and profound loss.
It was a cruel twist of fate.
Right.
And as you might expect, the pressure from the court, the weight of the dynasty's future,
Yeah.
began to suffocate their relationship.
Wow.
It reached a breaking point when the Shah suggested taking a second wife
Oh, wow.
solely for the purpose of producing an heir.
That must have been incredibly hurtful for Soraya.
Of course.
To have her husband,
Right.
the man she loved, essentially propose such a thing.
It was a difficult situation.
How did she react?
She was deeply wounded, of course. And ultimately, it became a turning point in their marriage. She offered to step aside
Wow.
to allow the Shah to fulfill his duty to the dynasty.
So after all they had been through,
Right.
after all the love and support they shared, their fairy tale was crumbling under the weight of an age-old tradition.
A sad reality.
What happened next?
It was a slow and painful unraveling.
Yeah.
Shah, despite his love for Soraya, felt the immense pressure of his responsibility to the throne.
Right.
And Soraya, heartbroken and feeling like a failure, agreed to a divorce.
Oh, wow.
A tragic end to what had begun as such a promising love story.
It really makes you think about the personal sacrifices people make,
It does.
even in the most seemingly glamorous settings.
Yeah, behind the facade.
So Soraya leaves Iran, heartbroken and divorced.
Right.
What becomes of her after this?
Yeah.
How does she cope with this loss and rebuild her life?
Well, that's where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Her life after the divorce is a testament to her resilience, her search for meaning and purpose outside the gilded cage of royalty. And it's a story that I think will resonate with you on a very personal level.
I'm very curious to hear more about that.
I think you'll find it quite fascinating.
It's hard to imagine going from being an empress
Right.
to suddenly having to navigate the world as an ordinary person.
No.
That must have been a jarring transition for Soraya.
It certainly was. She described it as a free fall, having to learn everyday tasks
Yeah.
that most of us take for granted,
Right.
like tipping waiters or even figuring out how to use electrical cords.
That's incredible to go from a life of palaces and servants
I know, right?
to having to figure out those mundane things.
It's a huge adjustment.
It really humanizes her, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It strips away the veneer of royalty
Right.
and reveals the woman beneath.
And as if that wasn't enough,
Right.
she was constantly hounded by the paparazzi,
Of course.
who were eager to capitalize on her sadness.
They were relentless.
They dubbed her the princess with the sad eyes, a label that, while evoking sympathy,
Right.
must have felt incredibly intrusive.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's like her personal grief became public property,
Exactly.
something to be dissected and sensationalized by the media.
It speaks to our fascination with royalty,
Right.
our tendency to project our own narratives onto public figures,
Yeah.
often forgetting that behind the titles and tiaras
Right.
were real people with real emotions.
So how did she cope with all this?
Wow.
Did she retreat from the world entirely? Or did she find ways to channel her energy,
She did.
her sadness, into something productive?
She eventually found solace in her lifelong passion,
Okay.
acting.
Oh, wow.
Remember, that was her dream before she met the Shah?
Right, right.
She even starred in a film called I Trivolti,
Wow.
using just her first name, Soraya, in the credits.
Wow. So she actually got to experience that life she had dreamed of as a young woman.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It's amazing. Was she any good?
Well,
did she find fulfillment in acting?
From what I gather, she did.
Okay.
It seemed to provide a much-needed creative outlet for her.
Yeah.
And it was on the set of that film that she met her second great love.
Okay.
The Italian film director, Franco Indovina.
That's so wonderful. It's like she was given a second chance at love and happiness.
It seemed that way.
Did they get married? Did she finally get her fairy tale ending?
Unfortunately, no tragedy struck again.
Oh, no.
When Franco died in a plane crash in 1972.
Oh, wow.
Another devastating loss for Soraya.
Yeah.
One that she never truly recovered from.
It's almost like a Greek tragedy.
It really is.
This cycle of love and loss that seemed to define her life. It makes you wonder about the role of fate,
right,
of destiny in shaping our lives, doesn't it?
It certainly does, and it reminds us that even those who seem to have it all, beauty, wealth, fame, are still vulnerable to the same pain and heartbreak as the rest of us.
So what happened after Franco's death?
Well,
did she continue acting?
No.
Did she find love again?
She didn't return to acting.
Okay.
Instead, she retreated to Paris, to the luxurious penthouse the Shah had given her as part of their divorce settlement.
Oh, wow.
She lived there for the rest of her life, surrounded by a small circle of friends and family.
It sounds like a life of solitude.
It was in many ways.
A far cry from the bustling court of Iran.
Yeah, quite a contrast.
It's almost like she came full circle.
Right.
Returning to Europe, where she had spent a significant part of her childhood.
It's interesting that you bring that up because her story actually has striking parallels to another famous royal figure we've discussed on this show.
Oh, really?
Empress Josephine.
Okay.
Napoleon's first wife.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Both women were deeply loved by powerful men, yet ultimately sacrificed their marriages for the sake of an heir.
Wow.
And both lived out their final years in relative solitude, haunted by the ghosts of their past loves.
That's a fascinating connection.
Isn't it?
It's like history repeating itself.
Yeah.
These two women, centuries apart.
Right.
Both experiencing similar heartbreak and isolation.
Exactly. And just like Josephine, Soraya attempted to reach out to the Shah during his final days, hoping to see him one last time before he died.
Oh, wow. Was she successful? Did they have a chance to reconcile, to say goodbye?
Sadly, no. The Shah's health deteriorated rapidly, and she was unable to reach him before he passed away.
Oh, wow.
It's almost as if fate conspired to keep them apart, even in their final moments.
That's heartbreaking.
It is.
Denied the chance to find closure, to express those unspoken feelings.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about the things we leave unsaid.
Right.
The regrets we carry with us.
It does, and it highlights the importance of cherishing the moments we have, of expressing our love and appreciation while we still can.
Yeah.
Because as we've seen with Soraya's story, life can change in an instant, and opportunities lost can never be fully reclaimed.
Her life was a roller coaster of emotions.
It really was.
But even though she experienced unimaginable wealth and privilege, she still faced the same human struggles as anyone else.
Exactly.
Loss, heartbreak, loneliness.
We're all human after all.
It's almost as if her story challenges the very notion of happily ever after.
It certainly does, and that's what makes her story so compelling, so relatable.
Yeah.
It reminds us that no matter our social standing, our wealth, or our fame, we're all connected by these fundamental human experiences. We all long for love, for connection, for meaning in our lives.
And sometimes, even a life of extraordinary privilege can't shield us from the pain and heartbreak that are an inherent part of the human experience.
Precisely. And Soraya's story serves as a powerful reminder that true happiness isn't found in external things like wealth or status, but in the connections we forge, the love we share, and the impact we make on the world.
It's strange to think that someone who lived such a public life, surrounded by so much opulence, could ultimately experience such profound loneliness.
It is a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think her second autobiography, titled Palace of Solitude, perfectly encapsulates that feeling of isolation that seemed to permeate her life. Even when she was surrounded by people and possessions.
That title is so powerful.
It is.
It really drives home the point that true connection goes beyond the superficial, beyond material wealth and social status.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder about the true cost of power.
Yeah.
And the expectations placed upon those in positions of authority.
Right.
Especially women.
Right.
Were their choices truly their own? Or were they dictated by tradition and societal pressures?
It's easy to get caught up in the fairy tale.
It is.
But, as we've seen with Soraya's story, her life was anything but a simple, happily ever after.
Exactly.
It was a complex tapestry of love, loss, sacrifice, and resilience.
Absolutely. And it's a story that continues to fascinate and resonate with people today. Her beauty, her elegance, her sadness, they all captivated the public's imagination and made her an enduring icon, even decades after her death.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Soraya's life, what would you say is the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
Wow.
What can we learn from her story, from her experiences?
I think for me, it's a reminder that behind the facade of royalty, behind those glittering tiaras and opulent palaces, are real people with real emotions and struggles. It's easy to get swept up in the glamour and the fairy tale. But Soraya's story reminds us to look beyond the surface and consider the personal sacrifices that are often made in the name of duty and tradition.
It's like her life was a cautionary tale.
Yeah, I think so.
A reminder that true happiness can't be found in external validation or material possessions.
Yes, and it underscores the importance of genuine connection, of pursuing our passions, and of finding meaning and purpose in our lives, regardless of our circumstances.
So for our listeners who are now pondering the life of Soraya Esfandiari Bakhtiari, what would you leave them with?
Oh, that's a good question.
What's a thought that could spark further reflection on her story?
I think a thought-provoking question to consider is this. Knowing what we now know about the pressures and sacrifices she faced, if Soraya could go back, would she choose the same path? Or would she forge a different destiny for herself? One perhaps less glamorous, but more aligned with her own personal desires and dreams.
That's a powerful question.
It is.
And one that encourages us to reflect on our own choices and priorities.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you for guiding us through this incredibly insightful deep dive.
Oh, you're welcome.
Into the captivating yet heartbreaking life of Soraya, the Empress of Iran.
It was my pleasure, and for our listeners, I encourage you to delve deeper into Soraya's story. Explore her autobiographies, and let us know your thoughts. What aspects resonated with you? What other historical figures have faced similar dilemmas? We'd love to hear your perspectives.
And of course, if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive.
Yes.
For more insightful explorations of captivating topics.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.
Thanks for listening.